It's 8:25 Central African Time, and you're listening to Africa Rise and Shine. We're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. An international conference focusing on trauma and healing is set to continue today. The conference opened last night and coincided with a book launch that focuses on the same issues. The book was launched as part of a public panel discussion focused on the current context for migrants in South Africa and abroad. The book, titled Healing and Change in the City of Gold, Case Studies of Coping and Support in Johannesburg, offers radically new ways of thinking about precarious life in the city of Johannesburg, particularly for migrants. Given the recent xenophobic violence in South Africa, the volume has a deep resonance as it traces through in-depth case studies of how migrant residents seek support. The event is hosted by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, IJR. For more on this, we are now joined on the line by the head at IJR in the Greater Horn, Friederike Bubenzer. Good morning, Friederike, and welcome to Africa Rise and Shine.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, firstly, tell us about the conference and what issues are expected to take center stage.
So the conference focus is really on bringing together the focus on mental health and psychosocial well-being as well as peace building. So looking at not just the strategies and the approaches that we as peace builders, IJR being a peace building organization, take towards building sort of more inclusive, socially cohesive communities, but focusing very much on mental health and how we can possibly bring those two fields closer together in order to sort of contribute to the sustainable social transformation goals that both mental health care practitioners and peace building practitioners are trying to achieve. So we don't usually come together like this. So it's sort of quite exciting to have a room full of, psychologists, psychiatrists, psychosocial support workers, and then people who are sort of from a peace building, reconciliation and transitional justice background to see how we can coordinate and improve on the work that we do by working closer together.
Now, how will delegates be engaging at the conference? As you say, you never really do this. This is the first time that everyone is coming together. What is expected of delegates?
I think a number of things. First, it's very important for us all to listen to one another. And so we've been having fascinating conversations about the concept trauma. What does trauma really mean? When is somebody traumatized? When is it good? Is it healthy to call somebody traumatized? And what does that mean for us who are trying to work with people to sort of, contribute to lasting relationships and peace in communities? So a lot of it is listening to one another, to the way we understand the issues that we work on. Do we see things the same way? Of course, a lot of it is networking as well. So bringing together people who are working in these divergent fields is very important, not least because we have people from around the world. So we have, experts from universities in the US and in Europe interfacing with academics from Africa and practitioners from the Middle East. So it's a very important coming together like that. But we also very much hope to have some very concrete outcomes, specifically with regards to beginning to change the policy landscape towards being more cognizant of the fact that we need to actually put people first, and that we need to fully acknowledge and recognize that people coming out of conflict are affected. And when the people are affected, the families are affected, communities are affected, society is affected, and we can't put that as an afterthought when we start healing and rebuilding communities that have been shattered by conflict. It can't be an afterthought. It has to be something that we integrate fully right from the start.
Now, given that the book was launched against the backdrop of the attacks on foreign nationals, do you expect delegates to delve into this discussion and maybe come up with possible solutions of the underlying issues of some of these attacks on foreign nationals?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the book obviously focuses specifically on Johannesburg and on that unique experience, but the conference has been dealing a lot with the South African situation and the South African story, and focusing so much on emotional and psychological well-being is obviously very relevant to understanding why these attacks happen. How does violence How does anger and frustration translate into violence? How do victims turn into perpetrators? So it's asking some of these difficult questions. But I think, one of the most exciting outcomes for me, and this hasn't really been official or anything, is that we definitely need a conversation of this scale in South Africa. So this is very much an international conference, but I think we need to look inwardly. We need to look at who we are as a nation, why we are so wounded, why we are so damaged, how is the legacy of the past impacting on who we are now, how is the transmission of such a long history of suffering and pain being transmitted onto our youth who are then living in very disenfranchised areas surrounded by structural violence.
Now, Friederike,
so I think we're getting a little bit closer here.
Yeah. Now, is this situation of attacks on foreign nationals, is this unique to South Africa, or is this a global phenomenon?
It's interesting you're asking that, because Professor Brandon Hamber, who's one of the editors of the book we launched last night, actually opened his comments by saying this is not unique. It happens the world over. So he was referring specifically to migrants landing in the Mediterranean and really facing very, very, extreme hardship when they come into these areas. So xenophobia is not uncommon. It's common across Europe. In a challenging economic environment, people coming to seek economic relief in those areas. It's very common. It's not always as violent as it is in South Africa. So we aren't seeing images on the front page of national papers of people stabbing one another and setting one another alight. So I think that's what we need to look at, why there is this incredible violence, this incredible anger, and why where is that coming from?
Friederike, unfortunately, we have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye.
That was Friederike Bubenzer, head at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in the Greater Horn. Our headlines up next with Onele.